Multi-day races are ultramarathon running events which are typically either segmented into daily events of a specified distance at a time, or staged so that runners can run as far as they want, at their own discretion, over a set course or over a set number of days. Multi-day races can range from continuous 48-hour track events to staged transcontinental treks. Beyond the marathon, very long endurance running events can be divided into three broad categories: the traditional 26.2-mile marathon, the ultramarathon, defined as any event longer than the marathon, and true multi-day events, which begin with the 48-hour event and can stretch out almost indefinitely, are often ranging from 6 days to 3,000 miles or longer. Ultramarathons, of which multi-day races are a subset, include events of any distance beyond the traditional marathon distance of 42.195 kilometers. Common ultra events include 100-mile and 100-kilometer races. Ultras are usually considered to include all events of 50 kilometers or longer, although the 50-mile race is regarded as the shortest true ultra. Depending on the degree of terrain difficulty, up to 30 hours or more is generally allowed for runners to complete typical ultras. For example, the Badwater Ultramarathon. Types of courses. Many multi-day races are held on tracks or measured loops, which eases provision of aid station support for runners. Stage races are the alternative. These include point-to-point races such as the Trans-American races, which traverse the North American continent coast to coast, and the Gobi March, a 7-day journey across the Gobi Desert. The Kalahari or Grabies Extreme Marathon, a 7-day 250 kilometers trail event in the Kalahari Desert, and the Yukon Arctic Ultra, a 126th-mile challenge crossing Yukon in the dead of winter. Longer multi-day races include the Trans-Europe Race, which ran from Lisbon to Moscow in 2003, a distance of about 5,100 kilometers. These events take the runner to a different level, where the race becomes a way of life and where nutrition, sleep, energy and psychological states have to be carefully managed. The Self-Transcendence 3,100-mile race is the longest certified foot race in the world. The past, the golden era of multi-day races, stretches back to the 1870s and 1880s, when they were held on indoor tracks and offered substantial prizes. Known as pedestrians, these athletes established records which in some cases have stood until recently. In summer 1809 in Newmarket, England, Robert Barclay Allardyce, better known as Captain Barclay, walked 1 mile for each consecutive hour, each consecutive day, totaling 1,000 miles. The most common multi-day race of the era was the 6-day race, which ran from Monday to Saturday, with Sunday being observed as a rest day. In 1878, Sir John Dugdale Astley was inspired to create a series of 5 international 6-day races, in which competitors vied for the Astley belt. 2 early competitors were the American Edward Payson Weston, who covered 500 miles in 6 days. The Englishman Charles Rowell covered 241 kilometers in the first day of a 6-day races in the 1880s. By the early 1890s, public enthusiasm for such events had moved into bicycle racing, and the multi-day running craze came to an end. Interest grew again in the late 1920s with the advent of Trans-America races. These events were transcontinental stage races that inspired a new generation to challenge the huge distance. There was little reward for these races in the long run, and it was not until the 1980s that interest reawoke in true multi-day races. In 1980, San Francisco postal delivery worker Don Choi organized the first modern-era 6-day race on a track in Woodside, California. the present. In recent years, several multi-day races have stood out, among them the Australian Westfield Sydney to Melbourne races, which were run from 1983 to 1991, and the Colac race, which is no longer being held. August 2012 will see possibly the final 64-stage Trans-Europe race organized by Ingo Schulze. Treachin Moy Races hosts several multi-day events annually in the U.S., 6 and 10-day races, a 3,100-mile race, 700, 1,000 and 1,300-mile races, and several 24 and 48-hour events in Europe, Asia, Australia and New Zealand. Trans-Gaul, Trans-Germany, the Deutschlandlauf, Trans-Korea, as well as occasional Trans-Am and Trans-Australia races, plus several 6-day events in Europe and South Africa. The Racing the Planet's 4 Deserts race series and the Marathon des Sables are among the most popular multi-day races taking place today. Notable pedestrians: Edward Payson Weston, Daniel O'Leary, Charles Roll, Fred Hitchborn, George Littlewood, Robert Barclay Allardyce. Notable multi-day runners: Aspra Hanel Peralto, Suprabha Beckyord, Sandy Barwick, Don Choi, Dipali Cunningham, Serge Girard. Trans-USA, Trans-South America, Trans-Africa and Trans-Eurasia record holder: Al Howie, Rimas J. Clytus, Janiska Uros, Arkham Hukims. Trans-Australia record holder: Surau Samara, Lorna Michael, first woman to complete Trans-USA. Stu Mittelman, U.S. record holder for 6-day race. Wolfgang Schwerk, William Sichel, world number 1 for 6-day race in 2009, world M55 record holder. Samuel Thompson ran 1,310 miles in 50 consecutive marathon races. Well-known multi-day races: 4 Deserts Atacama Crossing, Gobi March, Sahara Race, The Last Desert, Enduron International, Antibes 6-day race. Across the years: Athens International Ultramarathon Festival, WWW, Day Runners, GR, Cliff Young Australian 6-day race, George Archer 6-day, Marathon des Sables, Self-Transcendence 6 and AMP 10-day race, Self-Transcendence 3,100-mile race, Surges 48-hour race, Trans-Europe Foot Race 2009, Vienna Bratislava Budapest Supermarathon, Kalahari or Grabies Extreme Marathon, www.extrememarathons.com, Ultracentric, Yukon Arctic Ultra, LA Ultra, The High.